All right, Gentlemen Badass Podcast. We are back at it. It is Josh Kidney and Mick Doyle.
Hello, hello.
And today we've got a special guest, a friend of both of mine and Mick's, Donnie Dodge. Donnie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's this is quite the setup, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys.
Yeah.
For an hour.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Donnie's a really interesting guy. I got to know him just about a year ago by random happenstance and found out that he knew Mick, and the more I learned, the more I was interested. So we're going to get into a couple of different things that Donnie's done, but let's just kind of start out with your background. That's why where we like to start on this show is, what were you like as a kid? Where did you grow up? Tell us about your early life.
I was a smart ass. We can just go with that. I grew up in North. Was exactly. I grew up in North Bend, Nebraska, and small town Nebraska kid. My dad was a fire chief there in North Bend for a number of years and put 36 years on the department. My grandpa was fire chief there, put 20 some years on the department, and so I grew up around firefighting. I grew up around that world. I got to grow up at the fire station and see how to do things and how not to do things, and it was typical up until 12. And then my parents got divorced.
Okay.
And I decided I wanted to move in with my dad. And so it ended up being me and my dad and one of his friends that was going through a divorce, living in a single wide trailer. And his buddy didn't know that I was moving in. So, so those two had lived together for about 6 months, and then I decided I wanted to move in with my dad. So I just put all of my stuff into a sleeping bag, and my mom drops me off, and his buddy is the first one to get home. And I'm sitting there with all my stuff sitting in the living room in this tiny, tiny little a two-bedroom single wide trailer. And he looks at me and goes, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm moving in." I was 12 at the time. I said, "I'm moving in. Tired of my mom." And he just drops an F-bomb, turns around and walks out of the room.
He's probably thinking, this is not what I signed up for.
This is not what I signed up for.
Bachelor pad. Oh, wait, there's going to be a kid.
Yeah, man, we got a 12-year-old. Cool, now we got a designated driver. Is pretty much what they were thinking. But
Small towns for sure.
Exactly. Like I said, I was a smart ass. I played all the sports, was good at them. I was never great at any of them. I was part of the speech team. And, I was always that kid I would get in trouble just for the sake of a laugh. If I knew I could get a laugh out of the group, but it was going to get me some time after school, you know what? It was probably good. It was probably going to be worth it.
Worth it, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems to be a common theme among our guests, doesn't it? Like these successful artistic guys were like dicks to their teachers and couldn't have been bothered in school when they were young.
Yeah.
So there you go, kids. Stay in school, but be an asshole.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
you'll be successful. Get in trouble, and it's all going to work out.
It could. It very well could.
So from there, so I think I forgot to mention, you're a firefighter currently, a filmmaker, but before that, you had kind of a previous life in radio.
Did. If you go through the checklist of some of the stuff that I've done, a lot of people would look at it and just call BS. On it. I had 1 year of college, went to Midland in Fremont and had a blast. Probably could have taken that 14 or 15 grand and gone on vacation with it and got just as much out of it because I really wasn't concentrating on it. So I actually, I hesitate to call myself a Marine because I signed up for 8 years, was going to go into it, do crash crew fire and rescue, one of the hardest MOSs in the Marine Corps to get into. Signed up for 8 years. I graduated boot camp. I got halfway through infantry school, and they grabbed 5 of us out of the class and say, "You're going in for your final physical." This was 1992. And I'm like, cool. Well, then I'll just get shipped down to my training down in Tennessee. And they said, "Well, Mr. Dodge, you have scoliosis." I said, "Yeah, I know. I've known that since I was 8 years old. It's 11.5 degrees curvature to the right at this spot in my back." And they said, "Well, you should have never been able to enlist." And I said, "Well, that's a you problem because I'm here and I graduated boot camp." They said, "Well, you've got 2 options. We could take you over to the naval base and we can fuse a carbon rod to your spine, and then we'll see what happens. or we'll give you an honorable medical discharge, no benefits or anything like that, and we'll just send you on your way. And so obviously I'm not going to let them glue a fishing rod to my spine.
Yeah.
So to tell people, like I said, I don't claim to be a Marine. I graduated Marine Corps boot camp, and I am extremely proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was never a fleet Marine. I never left Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
So I come home, work a bunch of odd jobs. 1993 comes around, and Todd and Tyler on Z92 moved to town.
Okay.
And so I just start calling them, and I start calling, and I call, and I call. I'm supposed to be working at the co-op in North Bend, emptying grain trucks, and I'm sitting in the back listening to the radio, making long distance phone calls, just doing bits for these guys. And so I kind of bullied my way into their show. I was working overnights at Walmart unloading trucks in 1996. Todd calls me. I had gone into the studio several times, so I got to be friends with those guys. Todd calls me and says, "Hey, we got a call screener position if you want to take it." I'm like, daytime work in radio? I mean, that sounds good to me. So I take the job. Within 2 weeks, their producer gets fired for doing something I'm not going to talk about on the radio. It wasn't that bad, but he deserved to get fired for it. And so they offer me the position. So I go from unloading trucks at Walmart 1 week to 3 weeks later, I am the producer of the #1 rated morning show in Omaha. And I'm actually making about the same amount of money at the time. But my life changed completely.
Oh, yeah.
Completely. I ended up moving into Omaha. You meet a whole new set of friends. You know, I did 1996 to 2002 there. And to be the producer and to be part of a show like that was bringing in just ridiculous numbers ratings wise, and our popularity across the state. I get recognized to this day.
Yeah.
I left there in October of 2002 to pursue a career in firefighting. And that's 17 years ago. That's 16 and a half years ago. And I still to this day get recognized when I go out. If people hear me talking or they've met me in the past, they recognize me, which by the way pisses my wife off because I'm married to Jessica Dahl.
Yeah.
Jessica, who was on 17 years in Z92, and I get recognized before she does. And she just left Z92 about a year and a half ago.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to knock you down a peg, but I definitely knew your wife's name, and yours rang a bell when I first met you.
You're
but
a suck ass, because you know she's going to listen to this.
Yeah. Well, I want to get her on this show too. I want to talk to her on this show.
Oh, she'd definitely come on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you left Todd and Tyler show, was this the time when they were like syndicated across multiple states yet? Had that happened yet?
No.
Because this show was like, for people that don't know, not only was the biggest show in Nebraska, but it also, like, even in the Midwest, and then it had a national following too, right?
It had a national following. That all came after me. That came almost right after me, so I don't know if I was the anchor holding it down or not.
So you were holding them back.
Yeah.
But yeah, that came right after me. We were simulcast on a couple of AM stations.
Okay.
In the city of Omaha, but yeah, good job for them that they managed to blow up nationwide the way that they did.
I think that's where we met first, was through the show, right?
It was. You and I met. You came up and you were breaking bats.
With my shin?
With your shin.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
You were breaking bats. And at the time, you also were in partnership with the Omaha Wrestling Association.
With Maury.
Yeah, Maury Swanger, good friend of mine and a good friend of ours. And you had started this pro wrestling, or he had started this pro wrestling school. And so I was invited to become part of that. And so that's how you and I got to be good friends, because you started training me and it just kicked my ass. Just absolutely kicked my ass for a number of months, and been friends ever since.
Yeah. Most people in radio don't really work out because
No.
a lot of times, you never really see them.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm sure it probably happens quite a bit when if you're a radio personality and then people meet you and they go, "Oh, that's what you look like." Yeah. What's that, face for television, body for radio kind of thing?
That's exactly what it is. And to be the best looking person at the radio station is not that much of an accomplishment.
It's not a big
You have to consider the competition at that point.
No, it's funny.
So you doing radio, producing a radio show, then there's professional wrestling in there too, right? Didn't you do that a little bit?
I did. I started out, I used to host Monday night wrestling parties. It's kind of where I got my foot in the door with that. Back in the day when WWF and WCW were huge on Monday nights, I was out at Hooters. I spent 2.5 years straight every Monday night at the Hooters in Omaha. I was either helping Todd and Tyler host their Monday night football parties, or then after that, the very first Monday, I would host these wrestling parties, and we'd bring 100 kids out there, and guys in their 20s, to watch wrestling. And I'm like, well, we should start doing we should do a match. And so I started doing these self-taught pro wrestler, and then I get hooked in with the OWA, and next thing you know, I'm wrestling in front of 600 people at a National Guard armory, and this is a big deal. This was a blast.
Yeah.
And I've been involved with pro wrestling ever since. I've worked with Magnum Pro out of Omaha. I'm good friends with a lot of the guys that still work to this day. I'm actually the curator and creator of the Omaha, Nebraska Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Just started that project up because I need more to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we just inducted our very first Hall of Fame class in January, and we're working on our second class. Maury was part of that class.
Yeah.
And you can find that at prowrestling-omaha.com.
Okay.
And I've wrestled a lot of matches, but I'm 46 years old now, and it is a young man's game.
Well, Omaha is quite the tradition in pro wrestling, right? Isn't some of like the biggest names in the 70s?
Some of the biggest names in the 70s, Mad Dog Maurice, Mad Dog Vachon wrestled here. He lived here, just passed away a few years ago. A gentleman by the name of Mantar from the WWF days. Vern Gagne spent a lot of time here. Mean Gene Okerlund worked in radio here for a number of years. Guys by the name of the Dusek family back in the 60s and 70s. So the tradition goes way, way back into the 60s and into the 50s, honestly.
Why is that? Is it because there's like a high school wrestling tradition and then it's just kind of a carryover into the entertainment world, or what? What is the attraction about the Midwest, or is it just that there's not enough to do?
I honestly think that's what it was.
Really?
Is there wasn't that much to do, and back when Vern Gagne ran the territory, he ran Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Colorado. That's where if you were going to do a show, you had to go through him. It was kind of an like a little mafia kind of thing.
Oh, it's not that much different than it is today.
No,
right?
it's not. No, it's not.
Uh-huh.
But he was your contact, and people they gravitated towards it. And there are three companies right now working in Omaha once a month. And honestly, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to. You didn't used to be able to run shows in Nebraska. It was too expensive. It's like running kickboxing shows and stuff like that. You had to go through the boxing commission, which was absolutely asinine in my opinion, that you would regulate professional wrestling, which is more of an athletic performance. It's almost like a dance than it is an actual competition.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go through physicals. You had to get licenses. You had to go through all this stuff to get cleared by the boxing commission, which didn't make any sense to me. So after the boxing commissioner had left, they had an interim one down there. And I said, you know what, enough is enough. And in 2013, I just made an appointment to go down there. And I sat down with a couple of their inspectors and with the interim, the interim.
Was it Wally?
No,
Jernigan?
Wally had just left.
Okay.
Wally had just left, so it was the fill-in guy, and I start bending his ear about, you know what, if you've got more companies running, you're looking at more tax dollars in than you are charging these kids $125 for a wrestling license for the year, forcing them to go and get a full physical and blood work done, which costs a couple of $100. For these guys to go out and wrestle once or twice in Nebraska and maybe make $30 or $40.
Yeah.
So within, it took about 2 years, and they finally said, you know what, we're going to drop it. They deregulated the entire sport, and it's done nothing but help the industry grow. And I know there's a lot of people that kind of roll their eyes. If you've never been to a local professional wrestling show. You go to a Magnum Pro show, go to a PWP show down in Benson at the waiting room. And these are some of the most entertaining shows that you would ever see.
Mm-hmm.
The lights, the characters. If you can walk into a place and just completely suspend all belief in reality
Oh, sure.
and just sit there and have a blast.
Yeah.
You're not going to have more fun than one of those shows.
Yeah.
I can guarantee that.
Well, it crushed my kids' world. Do you remember my buddy Mick Tierney?
I do, yeah.
So Mick used to wrestle in WWE, and he was Kurt Angle's roommate as they were both going through wrestling school together. And Mick's character was never really going to be written into the storybook because his character was an ex-Irish terrorist. Timing probably wasn't real great on that.
Which, can you really be an ex-Irish terrorist?
Yeah.
It's one of those, you either are or you aren't.
Yeah, but he moved to Omaha. We're good friends. And one year he's like, hey, WWE are coming to Omaha. And my kids were young at the time. They were, I think probably like 13 and 11. And he's like, if you want, I can call Kurt and we'll get tickets and we go backstage. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I'll bring my kids. So I tell my boys, I'm like, hey, you guys are going to go to Monday Night Raw when it comes to I think it was, no, it wasn't the Civic. It might have been maybe it was the Civic Auditorium at the time. And so my kids are so excited. We get down there, we go backstage, we go in the back entrance, and here's all the wrestlers that they watch week in, week out. We're all sitting back there having cups of coffee together, playing cards. And my kids are devastated. They're like, Dad, that guy doesn't like that guy. I was like, well, it doesn't look like it to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, they look like they're good friends. And so they've all, at the time they used to call Mick Uncle Mick, and they're like, Uncle Mick, they're not friends. And he's like, no, they drove here together, yeah. And so he breaks the news to him that, like, this isn't like real, right? And they're like, what? And he's like, well, I mean, like, he goes, when a 250-pound man jumps 6 foot in the air and lands on you, he goes, that's really 260 pounds. He goes, but the results are all choreographed into the stories, and they were fucking crushed. Just absolutely crushed. And here I am thinking, I'm dad of the year. I'm bringing my kids backstage. They're gonna meet all their heroes.
Oh my
There's
God.
probably 40-year-old men listening to this podcast that are going to be crushed hearing that they're
wait,
hearing,
what?
wait, what?
Oh, and you're the one that took them to Santa's workshop, and they found out that the elves don't work there.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And they never watched wrestling again. If they did, they're like, nah.
Yeah.
Like, that shit's not real. And Mick, and meanwhile, is walking around like with like a surgery every couple of months, going, no, this is real. Like, my bad knee was caused by this fake wrestling.
Absolutely.
But, crushed them.
That's too bad.
And you just did, am I remembering correctly, you just had kind of a retirement party for yourself, retiring as a wrestler, is that right? Or,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I retired as a wrestler. It was ironic that in November we did a show up in Oakland, Nebraska at the hall up there. And I'm out of shape. I can't go 20 minutes with these kids. So local guy, the storyline was, you know what? I've got a bad neck. I've got a bad back. Doctor sitting there. And actually my doctor was there watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I said,
Just in case.
And I was feeling great, but I just knew I couldn't wrestle. And so I was going to be part of the match. I was going to interfere at some point. So the storyline was I've got this bad neck, and one bump could kill me. If I land on my back wrong, I've got stenosis, and I've got this and that. That was November. In May, the next year, I wake up, and my right arm won't move. And I end up in the emergency room. They do an MRI, and sure enough, I've got stenosis in almost every one of my cervical vertebrae. And if I were to take another bad bump, then it could sever the whole thing. And it's all complete irony that it happened that way.
Yeah.
If you were at the November show in Oakland, I apologize, I lied to you, but it ended up being real.
Yeah.
So
just willed it to yourself.
I did. So it's one of those things that you have to know when it's time. I've seen too many guys go in the ring one last time and that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I know that I know I would have had I not gotten that injury and gotten that definitive answer from the doctors that you absolutely positively cannot do this. I know I would still be calling up the owner of PWP going, you know what? I think I got one more hardcore match in me. I smash somebody else in the face with something.
Shout out to my spine surgeon.
Yeah.
I'm still not listening to you.
Oh, yeah. So do you know what caused that stenosis then? Was it from the wrestling? Was it from just everything
Wrestling,
else?
football, my job, it's just repeated. I've got bone spurs and stuff like that too. So, I mean, it could have been that way this whole time and it just didn't affect me.
Yeah.
But that one injury with the stuff blowing, the discs blowing out and kinking off the nerves, it just, thank God it happened.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I probably would have forced my hand and tried to get in there a couple more times and done something stupid and accidents happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So from there, well, not necessarily from there, but kind of interspersed in there, firefighting. So what, you mentioned that your dad was a firefighter. Kind of give us the background on that. What got you interested, and then what was the process of you getting into firefighting?
Oh, being a kid, growing up around that North Bend fire station, it was the most exclusive club to get into in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, they had a waiting list. Town of 1,200 people, and they had a waiting list to try and get onto this fire department. And it's all volunteer. You don't get paid. You just show up when they call you. Mm-hmm. Well, my grandpa had been a firefighter for North Bend as well, and he was a past fire chief. And he passed away in 1974, a couple of years after I was born. And then my dad got on the department in 1971. And so when I got on, I continued that streak of Dodges in the Nebraska Fire Service since 1944.
Wow, that's cool.
And our family is so proud of that. And growing up around that department, I saw it was a family. And like I said, at the time, like I said earlier, my parents were divorced. So I needed that group of people for support.
Yeah.
You need that group of people to be around. And let's face it, it's a fun job. You get to drive fast, make a lot of noise. You get to break stuff. You get to crawl into burning buildings. I mean, that's not a fun job to everybody, but by God, that's a fun job to me.
Yeah.
I absolutely, positively love what I do.
Yeah. That's cool. Now, from what I remember, it was kind of a difficult road, though, for you to get into it. Am I right?
It was. When I quit the Todd and Tyler show in October of 2002, I left because I was assured that I had a job with the city of Elkhorn and their fire department. And then I got there, and the fire chief says, all that stuff you did with the Todd and Tyler show for the last 6 years? Yeah, we don't want our name attached to that. So, yeah, you're probably not going to get hired. So I'm like, you know what? Okay, so I'm testing for other departments, and I guess that's what's going to happen. So I didn't get hired until January of 2004.
Okay.
So I end up, and this is a fair warning for anybody that wants to get into radio. When I left that morning, I thought I had a firefighting job. Turns out I didn't. I drove to Home Depot and took a job unloading trucks overnight. And I walked in the door making more unloading trucks overnight than I did after 7 years in radio. Yeah.
Doesn't seem right, does it?
The fun jobs never pay that well.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. You want to be the names on the marquee, not the guys making things happen backstage. That's plain and simple. You want to be the main event guy. You don't want to be the opening act.
Wow.
Yeah. If you would have gone back in time, then you think if you just would have used a different name on the radio, it wouldn't.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, being from here, growing up here, and having that name, the alliteration, it's just an easy name to say, and it's an easy name to remember. And my God, yes, I would have changed it. I would have changed. I don't know what I would have changed it to, but I definitely would not have used my real name on radio.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So beyond that, then, for people maybe interested in firefighting, what advice would you give, like a young person, college, graduate, interested in a career in firefighting? What advice would you give them?
If you're listening in a small town, be part of your your volunteer department.
Okay.
That's step one, to see if you even want to do it.
Okay.
Because you can say, I want to be a firefighter, but until you actually get into the weeds and figure out what they do, that's where you're going to figure out if you want to even, I don't want to say waste your time, but you would be wasting your time if you didn't go towards that step first.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to be a kickboxer. Okay, cool. Here's your match on Saturday. You get kicked in the face once and go, what the hell did I do?
I didn't sign up for this.
I didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to wear the shorts and just swing my legs around. If you're living in a more urban area, there are programs that you can sign up for through Metro Community College. You've got smaller departments inside the city of Omaha, like Ralston, that have opportunities for kids to be volunteers, and Bennington, Irvington, towns like that. If you're in any big town, there are going to be small little pockets where you can find places to go to learn firefighting, to see if you even want to do it. Take an EMT class, because that's 70% of firefighting nowadays in 2019 is medical. 70%, 7 out of every 10 runs that I do has something to do, whether it's a car wreck or sick or heart attack or shooting or whatever it happens to be.
So do you need a college degree to be a firefighter?
Absolutely not. Most departments that I have tested for, you need to be 19 with a high school diploma and a driver's license. That's most departments. Some departments, if they're only hiring paramedics, then you're gonna have to shoot a little higher for that. But the majority of the departments across the country only have that minimal minimal designation.
Gotcha.
That's it.
See, I think even to be like law enforcement anymore, I think you need a criminal justice degree, right? Or
I don't know.
Potentially, yeah. We'd have to look it up. I believe that you can actually get into it if they need people where you don't have, but I think it comes, it's more, it's definitely a leg up if you do.
Yeah.
So with the job, I mean, obviously a fun job still has its downsides. What would you consider some of the downsides of being a firefighter, or some of the harder aspects of your job? I know you can't get into specifics,
Right. Honestly, the mental part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mental part of it, and there are people on the job that, and everybody just sits back and pounds their chest and says, I can handle it. Oh, I can handle it. Well, you know what? Not everybody can. And there are programs. Luckily, the department and our union have programs for counseling and stuff like that. And it is and it's something that I've gone through to where you just you can see it, but you can't unsee it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that is probably, I mean, you're putting yourself in harm's way going into a fire, going out on the interstate at 2:00 in the morning to a car accident. You're putting yourself in harm's way going onto a scene where somebody just got beat up or shot or something like that. But you need to know when you're having issues.
Okay.
And that is the hardest part to me and to a lot of guys that are on any department, not just the one I'm on, but any department across the country. The hardest part is the mental issues that people go through after dealing with what they get called to help with.
What would you think some of those signs to know if you are having
that's
problems?
easy. That's easy. You start drinking too much. That's the first sign that I've seen. That's the first sign that I did.
Okay.
You start to drink too much because I'll just drink. That'll make it go away. You start losing sleep. You start losing a lot of sleep. You start forgetting things. And not just normal, I forgot to go do that. You forget complete entire conversations that you had with someone while you're totally sober. It's, you start to feel like you don't want to do the job, or you can't do the job anymore. And those are steps that you need to be able to recognize, and then having the courage to step forward and ask for help. I'm a grown man. Like I said, I'm 46, and to have to pick up that phone and make that phone call and say, I need help. I need help. And that's what a lot of people do. And I would venture to guess that there are so many more out there that need to do that haven't mustered up the courage, or they're still thinking that it's the old school days and I can just handle it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. I mean, one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this podcast is really just to round out men, right? And so many people think that the manly response is all just suck it up and deal with it. And a lot of times, in a lot of situations, yeah, you do need to suck it up and deal with it. But I think when we're talking about mental issues, and there's plenty of issues where that's not the case, where you actually have to get some help, and that's okay. You're not less tough for getting help.
I think you're probably tougher to admit
Oh,
that,
yeah.
you need some guidance or some help to get you through so that you can continue to do the job and continue to be a benefit to the department and the city that you work in. I think walking away is certainly an easier option, but
Yeah.
it's not a good one.
Absolutely not. No, I agree with both of you guys.
So from there, then, one more of those things that's hard for people to believe. Filmmaker.
Yeah.
Making films. How did you get into making films?
This is this kind of came out of nowhere with my creative background with being the producer on the radio show, and I produced 3 comedy best of CDs for Todd and Tyler, which are still out there apparently, that you can buy them. Discount bins mostly, I believe.
I think most CDs are in discount bins.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I'm showing my age there. So I produced these comedy CDs, and I enjoyed doing that. I really, really enjoyed the creative aspect of sitting down and putting something together or writing a bit that was funny, that would get a reaction. So 3 years ago, I started taking care of my dad. My dad was in hospice. And so I was the primary caregiver on that. My siblings were helping a lot, and his brother was helping quite a bit. But I needed something to just be able to turn my brain off, to come home and just turn my brain off. So I live up in Oakland, Nebraska, which is about an hour outside of Omaha. And my son was part of their football team, and they've got an amazing football program up there. And they were doing they were in the playoffs at that point. And I thought, you know what? Let's put together a little commercial for these guys to put on Facebook. They're good kids. So I put together and it was some lame ass Ric Flair, to be the man, you got to beat the man kind of thing. And totally ripped off copyrighted material, by the way, just completely ripped it off. And so I threw that together, and then they started to get bigger and bigger and longer and longer. And I started buying more and more because I started enjoying what I was doing, because I could dive into one of these projects for 3 to 4 hours. And at the end of it, I'm like, oh, you know what? I haven't thought about the old man for 4 hours.
Sure.
That was really, really nice. So they keep getting bigger, and they keep getting bigger. And then 2 years after that, they make it to the playoff, or they make it to the state playoffs in basketball. So I do this Hoosiers parody and it's called Knights. And I have all the kids acting out the main scenes from Hoosiers. And I thought it was pretty good for shooting with a crappy little camera.
Yeah.
And putting it together on a laptop. I thought it was pretty damn good. And they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you flash forward to 2017? Yeah, 2016, right, yeah. 2017, somewhere in there. The city council comes to me. A couple people from the city come to me and go, "Hey, it's Oakland's 150th celebration coming up this summer. Could you put together some little remembrance, some little historical videos, just a couple minutes long, that we could put on Facebook?" Sure. So I start digging into the history. And Oakland's got all of their newspapers archived back to 1886 online. And so I start researching. And 10 and a half months later, I come up with A.E. Wells, A Man in His Park. And it is the story of a man by the name of Asa Wells, who was completely forgotten in the history books of Burt County and Oakland, Nebraska. Completely forgotten. You'd go up and talk to the 90-year-olds up at the home, and they say, "Well, yeah, we heard of Wells Park, but our parents talked about it, but nobody really knew where it was. Nobody knew why it was there. Nobody knew who built it." And I found out all of that stuff. I just sat there for days after days after days digging into the history of this man that nobody else knew about. And I created this 30-minute documentary about his entire life. And I did it all on a laptop. I usually did it with a beer sitting next to me. And I didn't have a $5,000 camera. I think the most money I spent was on the $160 for the actual production, the production program, the CyberLink Media Suite, and then the $15 or $30 a month, whatever it is, to the Ancestry.com and stuff like that, and then finding all of these sites. And I know that's a really long answer. I apologize for that.
Right.
No.
That's actually what I want.
But I created a film. I researched something. There's nobody else on this planet that knows more about that man. I am an expert in one. I am an expert in the life of one human being, and there's nobody else on the planet that can say that. And I, as a history buff, that really, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To me anyway. And the fact that nobody in Oakland knew about this guy. Nobody.
And he was a remarkable man too. I've watched the documentary, and the story of his life is just ridiculous. It's hard to believe that it's true.
Right.
And then just the fact that he had such an impact on that town to not be remembered, it's crazy. So I think you're doing him a huge
and the fact that
justice.
Thank you very much, by the way. And the fact that he didn't have any male heirs, and the last heir that I could find would have been his granddaughter, died in 2014, and then it just drops off a cliff from there. You can't find out any more information about the family. But history is written by the winners, and Oakland is a Swedish town. Oakland, Nebraska is a very Swedish. They are the Swedish capital of Nebraska, or at least one of them.
Yeah,
I think there's a couple, but their claim is. And so back in the 40s, we all kind of know what Germany did. And so it wasn't that cool to have a German name anymore. And so a lot of the Swedes in that area kind of took ownership of the town. And therefore, when the history books were written, they concentrated more on the Swedish aspects of it.
Wow.
And they didn't concentrate on the fact that this guy came here with $3.5 million, or what the equivalent of $3.5 million cash, opened up a bank, ran it for a couple decades, and helped settle the entire valley, and then gave this 30-acre park to the people of Northeast Nebraska for absolutely nothing, and just gave it to them and put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into this park and just gave it to them. And nobody, there was one page in the last history book that was written about it, and it mentioned the park. It never, ever, ever mentioned him. And I'm excited. I'm excited that I have resurrected his memory.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I'm the most proud of.
Yeah, definitely a story that needed to be told. Now, you received some critical acclaim for this too, right?
Yes, 13 different film festivals, some of them online, some of them actual film festivals throughout the planet. Australia, Delaware, Atlanta. You go all the way out to Los Angeles. I was a semifinalist in a New York film festival. A couple here in Nebraska, and we've won 6 awards with this, and it's still going. I'm still entered in. I think another 20. I went a little crazy with entering this thing into film festivals, but it still continues to do real well, and I'm very, very proud of that.
So, yeah, it's a great film. Hopefully we can put some information in how people can get it, because they can buy a copy of the DVD and all the money goes to charity. Isn't that correct?
Correct. If you go to dodgewell.com, which is the name of my production company, anything that's bought for the from that DVD, A.E. Wells, A Man in His Park, 100% of the money that comes in from that goes to the Burt County Relay for Life, the American Cancer Society. We've raised just over $1,200.
Awesome.
For the American Cancer Society through showings and the sale of the DVDs on that particular project.
Yeah. Well, and then even from beyond there, like right about the time I was kind of met you and then saw this documentary, you were telling me about the next one that you were working on, and I was even more excited. You told me the story behind this one. I'm like, I cannot wait for that. And it finally came out, and I consider myself lucky. I got to pre-screen it. And,
Yes, you did.
So I've seen it, and it's another great one. So tell us a little bit about that one.
This one is called Chatterbox, a Cornhusker Hero.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the story of a gentleman by the name of Bob Chat. And he grew up in Tacoma, Nebraska, another Northeast Nebraska guy. And the way that I found this story was there's a bar in that town that just opened up called Chatterbox. In there having a couple of drinks, talk to the gal behind the counter. I say, who's the guy up there in the picture at the next to the bomber? She goes, oh, that's my grandpa. He named his plane Chatterbox because of our last name. And I'm like, oh, well, that's really cool. That's very cool. And she's like, yeah, he sunk a boat, something like that. We got all his medals, but I don't really know a ton. And I'm like, in my brain, I'm screaming at her going, that's your grandpa. How do you not know that? Are you kidding me? So I'm like, all right, you know what? These stories jump out at you, and you just have to be able to recognize the flag and
the
pick it up.
opportunity there.
Yeah, recognize the opportunity. If I can jump back to A.E. Wells real quick,
Mm-hmm.
I had done all of this research. I had a 20-some page, basically a report written, but I didn't have any pictures. I had a few grainy, crappy pictures, and nothing disinterests me more than watching a documentary with the same 6 pictures.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you can't do it. So I'm at the Swedish Heritage Museum in Oakland, and I'm taking pictures, and I'm pretty disappointed about what I'm seeing and what I'm finding. And so I walk by and I bump into this little wicker basket that's on a table, and I glance down. And do you remember the old time viewfinders where it's 2 pictures right next to each other, and you put them in there and it's got a magnifying glass, and you got to move it back and forth. The very top picture in this basket is a picture of the fountain that was at the entrance of Wells Park. The very top picture. And I looked at the curator and I said, what is this basket? He goes, I don't know. I just took it out of the basement. It was in a box for God knows how long.
Yeah.
I just took them out about 6 weeks ago. So can I look through these things? 84 pictures. I found 84 pictures of Wells Park alone in that box that nobody alive has seen until the movie.
Yeah.
Now, that was the flag. I bumped into it. I looked down. I saw that picture and I went, this is it. Perfect. This is what I needed. So go to Chatterbox, and she tells me this story, and she says, well, we don't know a lot about it. And I'm like, that's my flag. This is what I got to do.
Time to dig.
It's time to dig. And it was one of those, okay, he's a vet, so I'm going to dig into it. And if I don't find anything interesting, it's still, I'm still learning something about a hero. And I start digging into it. And because of my history with the Wells Park stuff, I knew where to go now. And I found so much cool stuff. I found the never before seen hand typed report that he filed after the battle that he was in. The family had never seen that. I found film footage from a newsreel they were on the planes during this battle. The family had never seen that. So I find all of this stuff. I find other pictures. I find a combat photographer that was stationed at the same base in Papua New Guinea that he was. They kind of overlapped a little bit. And I found all these pictures, and I'm like, this is it. I tell the story, and his story is, it's not as grand.
Right.
It's not as world travel Civil War vet thing that Asa Wells was, but this is small town anywhere, goes to Nebraska, ends up a champion swimmer on accident. He ends up volunteering to become a pilot, and he ends up in the battle that turned the tide against the Japanese in World War II, called the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. And to have a hand-typed a play-by-play with actually a hand-drawn map on the back page of exactly how he came in at this ship and what type of ship it was, it's too much information to not put it out there. And it's such a great story. And then to find out that he never talked about it. He would start to talk about it, and then he'd be like, "Oh, you don't want to hear about that. I don't want to bother you with that." And it falls back on the same premise that you guys talked to me about just a little bit ago, is his way of dealing with it was, it'll get better. I don't need to talk to anybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was 2 years before he passed, he sat down with a journalist, and they recorded all of their stories. And it's actually in the Library of Congress, his stories of him telling what he did and how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
I found that out after the movie came out. That would have been information that would have been helpful for the project.
Well, I mean, it sounds like if the fire department doesn't work out, you have a job as a detective.
Oh, yeah, really? Personal detective or something. Yeah, I mean, from what, I don't know, we don't want to give a whole lot of detail out so people can actually go watch, but what he did was a very heroic act.
Amazing act.
But it could weigh so heavily on your soul. I can't even imagine.
And to write, and that was the difficult part, was to write this. Kids nowadays don't understand what the world was back then.
Sure.
They don't understand an entire group of people. We're just going to load up on every ship that we've got, and we are just going to come over and we're going to try and take all your shit. And that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Germans were doing. That's what the Japanese back in the time were doing. And to push along the story of what Bob did and how he did it, and the number of people that paid that price for being on that wrong side, to be able to word that as, okay, well, they lost their lives, but it was either them or him.
Sure.
And that's what life was back then.
Yeah.
And I think I've done and I'm going to be totally honest with you. When I get done writing these scripts, I'm extremely long-winded, as you can tell by my answers. I write. I don't even type. I still write them out by hand on legal pads. And then thank God I have my wife, who is a journalist major, and she goes through and edits it out and says, wow, well, those 5 sentences can be broke down to 4 words. Once I get it edited down and I read it for that first time, and I've done it twice with both of them, when you read it from beginning to end, I will sit there and I will cry because to me, it's that much of a release of, oh my God, I created this. It's got to be that way when you probably didn't cry in the ring, but the first time you got in there and you really put it to somebody, it had to feel good. You had to just have this.
I think it's a triumph.
Yeah.
It's a personal triumph, and there's a lot of emotion that comes with that. I think what you're doing is probably even more nobler, because a triumph in the ring is completely selfish, but you're telling someone else's story that, for whatever reason, shame, trauma, whatever, he couldn't tell that story himself, and unfortunately he's not around to see that story being told, which I think both of the documentaries, I think you do a great justice to mankind by telling the story of people that didn't get their chance, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. I mean, and with the Chatterbox documentary, once again, we raised over $1,200 in one night during the initial screening, the world premiere at Chatterbox. We raised $1,200, and that all went to the Gary Sinise Foundation for all the work that they do for veterans.
Yeah. So what was the reaction of people, when you have a premiere? It's your documentary. This is your baby. Mm-hmm. You're about to air it in front of a very intimate audience in a place that's named after this guy. What kind of stuff is running through your mind at this point when this is all about to kick off?
What in the hell did I do? What did I put myself through? And so both of them, on both airings, I stood in the back, and it was completely different. You're exactly right. When I did the Wells Park one, I'm standing in the back hoping that people laugh when they're supposed to laugh and gasp when they're supposed to gasp. That's a normal reaction. But you're exactly right. To stand in the back knowing that half the people in that building were his relatives.
Yeah.
They were grandkids. They were his son was there and daughter-in-law. And to let them watch that and see that the way that they reacted, and to see their family members come up to me and shake my hand and say, thank you. We had no idea. We had no idea, and we never would have seen any of this stuff if it wasn't for you. And that just, that was, with the exception of my kids being born, and I think that's probably the most proud I've ever been, is to have a family member come up and thank you for telling them the story about something that they should have known in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, if it ever goes bad, it's still not too late to develop a stage name, you know. The director, he just left.
Yeah, he's gone. I don't know what happened to that guy.
It's still not too late.
Oh no, I screwed up that many years ago. I'm gonna milk this thing for everything
stuck
it's worth.
with it now.
Director Ronnie Hodge.
Yeah. You is what you is.
And you know, so you're actually in the process, and I'm excited about this one too, in the process of working on your next film.
Yes, I am. It's when I throw myself into these things, I'm going in both feet. And this one comes from, once again, it's a flag. 3 years ago, my wife bought me a picture for Christmas. She knew I was a Husker fan, and so she was at a boutique or whatever, and she bought me this 16 by 20 framed copy of the 1910 Nebraska Cornhusker Missouri Valley Conference Championship team. And it's just 20-some kids and a coach sitting on the steps in front of this grand marble facade. And I've looked at it, and I've looked at it, and I started to do some digging on it initially when I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's not even names on this. Who the hell are these kids? You see the coverage that the kids get today coming out of high school
Yeah.
that have never set foot on the field.
They haven't done anything yet.
They haven't done a damn thing, and you know everything about them. You know their stats, you know their parents, you know their school. They're making music videos. These guys played in a time, it was the very first year of the legal forward pass. They wore padded sweaters. They didn't even have numbers on their jerseys. Most of them didn't wear helmets. And if they did wear a helmet, it was just a leather, like this leather pullover. And so I'm like, I need to find out more information about this. And the more I dug into it, it was a really, really interesting season. And as far away as it was, 108 years, 109 years, whatever it is, my math is bad. They dealt with the same crap. So it's concentrating. It's called All the King's Men. And it is named after the head coach. His name was William Cutler Cole. And so everybody back then, their nickname, they called him King Cole. So that was his nickname. Even the newspapers referred to him just as King. And he only coached at Nebraska for 4 years. And he won the conference twice. But the 2 years that he didn't win the conference, the media was calling for his head. They wanted him. They wanted him gone. They think that it's Nebraska. We need a new coach. Well, this guy had won a national championship at Michigan as a player. He had coached at Virginia, and then they coaxed him into coming to Nebraska. And the stories of the entire year of him dealing with the players, and I'm digging more into the players, and digging more into him as a man and him as a coach. And this is a period of time where Nebraska fans, they know pretty much what the Wikipedia page tells them about this, and a lot of that is wrong.
So is this set around the time of the Great Depression here?
1910, just before.
Okay, before. All right.
Yeah, just before. So it was a big change in sports in general. That year, like I said, it was the very first year of the forward pass. They would allow the forward pass. But the specific rules, you couldn't throw the ball more than 20 yards. If the ball was tipped and it went to another receiver, it was a penalty. If you threw an incomplete pass, the play was dead where he threw the ball from. So there were some different rules that they had to deal with. It was the very first year that you couldn't dive to tackle someone. Because the year prior to that, in 1909, 32 kids died playing college football.
Wow.
32 died. And that's how they would tackle, was they would just come running in, put their head down, and dive through somebody. Well, either the tackler would break his neck or the other kid would get hurt, and they'd die right there on the field.
Jeez.
So there are actually editorials in some of these newspapers about how this is basically the pussification of football.
Because kids are dying?
Well, because we can't dive at them. We can't dive at him anymore. We can't hit him with the crown of our head. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
So they were talking targeting back in 1909.
Wow.
And that all the pass rules, that was the very first year that they actually had pass interference rules. And so this is going to be a watered down, they might as well let women play it. And you go 110 years later and they're talking about the same
stuff.
Same stuff. So it's my goal to introduce people to a football team that played for Nebraska, that did very, very well, that still hold a scoring record to this day, and they know basically absolutely nothing about these people. And so that's my goal, is to, once again, found a story, came out of nowhere, came out of a picture hanging on a wall that my wife thought I would like, and it's going to turn into, this one's going to be a long one.
Yeah. You're covering a lot of people, not just one in this instance. So.
Yeah, this one's probably going to be over an hour.
Do you have the support of the university on this?
I'm still working on that. I've found all the information that I need to get from them. Now it's just a matter of them signing off on it, because once again, I'm not making any money off of this. I think that may be a deciding factor in them saying yes.
Yeah.
And as long as they get, a lot of these places just want to see it first before it gets out. So I'm not putting out some kind of propaganda thing. Yeah. And bashing kids or anything like that. But most of these kids that I'm talking about died in the 60s. So yeah, I'm still working with them on that, and I'm also going through some of the other schools that they played back then to get permission from that.
We'll talk after the show, because I have a connection for you there.
Excellent. I like it.
Well, I'm just thinking, they have like throwback jerseys in the NFL. They should go throwback rules. Like, can you imagine seeing a football game with those rules? Like, you can't pass more than 20 yards, and if you incomplete pass, and it's from wherever the quarterback threw the ball.
And it looked more like a watermelon. The football looked more like a watermelon than it did an actual football that you know today.
That would be.
And their quarterback, Jerry Warner, who was, and this is a fun story. Jerry Warner was a quarterback. He was quarterback for Nebraska for 2 years. It was his freshman year in 1910. He comes in, new passing rules. So he basically is Nebraska's very first dual threat quarterback, because he can throw and he can run. Gentleman from Beaver City, Nebraska, out in toward the armpit and the panhandle there. So I'm doing my detective work, trying to find family. So the easiest way, if any of you kids out there ever want to do a documentary and you want to try and find family to get information from, you have to go to that person's obituary, and then find those people that he has survived by. And then you have to go to those people's obituaries and find that who they're survived by. And so I find his great-granddaughter on Facebook. So I message her, and I'm like, I'm not a creeper. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm looking for. And she sends me back, and she sends me an initial response back of, I think you have the wrong person, because this is a woman in her 40s. I think you have the wrong person, because I think I would know if we had a Nebraska quarterback in the family. So I think you've got the wrong person. 2 days later, that was the day before Thanksgiving. 2 days later, I get another message from her. Talked to my grandma. Turns out that was my great uncle's brother. So yeah, we'll dig up some information for you.
Crazy.
So they had no idea.
Wow.
The only one that knew was the grandma.
Yeah.
So tell your stories. If you're an adult, tell stories to your kids.
Yeah.
Write them down.
Yeah. My wife's grandpa, he's 95, 96. He was a World War II vet. And we heard he was writing up his memoirs, and we're like, yes, this is amazing, because he fought in Germany, like, just an amazing story. And, it only ended up being 2 pages, and we're just like, no, keep writing. Like, you've got more. We want to hear it all, because this guy was phenomenal. He's got some amazing stories. But
some of those guys do. It's the stories that you hear. One of the funny ones that I heard about Bob Chat was, he spent some time in the Pentagon after he came back to the States. He came back to the States right after the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, a couple weeks after. Ends up as a flight instructor in Florida, and then ends up at the Pentagon, of all places. So he gets to come back and visit. He just hops in a B-25 and flies back to Takema, hits the little airfields along the way, and then finally gets to Takema, and he's sitting at the local tavern having a few, and somebody calls bullshit on his story. He tells the story about what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was ridiculously dangerous. And in the heat of the moment, he's like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Be outside in 15 minutes. And so he gets in his car and goes back out to the airfield, or the soybean field where he landed the thing. And he comes through downtown Takema, about 10 feet off the ground, 350 miles an hour in a B-25. And that's all he did. And he broke a number of windows, and he
Nebraska's first drive-by.
And he lands back out in the field, and he drives back in, and they said he walks back in and he sits down, and the guy just looks at him and goes, I will never call bullshit on you again.
What can I get you to drink?
Yeah.
Awesome. Different times,
Yeah.
much simpler times, I think.
It was.
Well, this has been great. I think we need to go ahead and start wrapping up. So I did want to cover too, your son's got a charity, Athletes for Children. That's
Yes.
your son's charity, right? But you do a lot of work for that as well.
I help him run the website and help him
Okay.
out with some of the creative aspects of it. But my son Garrison Dodge, who was a senior at Oakland Craig this year, for public service, he wanted to get some public service done. So he was 6 weeks premature, as was my oldest daughter Lily, and so he created this charity called Athletes for Children. Athletes, the number 4 children.com. And what he's doing is he is donating money to Children's Hospital newborn intensive care unit for like $1 for every touchdown that he scores, $1 for every 4 points he scores in basketball. And it really, really took off. We've got 36 athletes across the state of Nebraska from 17 different schools, and they are donating money anywhere from in 9 different sports: wrestling, softball, track. And the beautiful part about this is we never touch any of the money, and we've got total permission from Children's Hospital. That was the first place we went, and they said absolutely, it's a great idea. And then we went to the NSAA, who regulates high school sports in Nebraska, saying we want to make sure that we're not violating anything, and they're like, no, this is great. So basically, these kids they pledge however they want to pledge, and then at the end of their season, they go to the Children's Hospital website. And then in a little subject line, they write Athletes for Children. Children's Hospital tracks it for us. And we're sitting right now probably a little over $2,000 to $3,000 that we've brought in. The North Bend Central football team just cut us a check for $568.
Wow.
The Takema Herman softball team, $250. We've got people matching. We've got businesses matching. Our goal is $10,000. That's our goal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we've been doing in my free time.
Yeah, free time.
Yeah. So it's quite an amazing, and for him to step up, and do that, and be the spokesman, and help me create stuff like that. I couldn't be more proud.
Yeah.
Some parenthood done right there.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well,
Good
and
job.
I'll put links to all of this in the show notes on the website. So for Dodgewell Productions, for Athletes for Children, I'll have links for all that. So if you're listening to this and want to support that or learn more about it, those links will be in the show note at thegentlemanbadass.com. So we'll go ahead and get the workout of the week and the book of the week out. You want to go with the workout first, Mick?
Sure.
Oh no, you got the book.
Yeah, so actually it's interesting that we're talking about Nebraska, the University of Nebraska, because this book actually has a connection with the university. This book right here is called How Full Is Your Bucket? Positive Strategies for Work and Life by Tom Path and Dr. Don Clifton. Dr. Clifton was a psychology professor at UNL, and during his tenure down there, he kind of had an epiphany that he was like, why is psychology, the whole field of psychology, always about what's wrong with people? And why aren't we focusing on what is right with people, and what benefit or what kind of influence would that be if we started to focus on what what people do right versus what they're always doing wrong. So basically, over 50 years, Dr. Clifton and his colleagues conducted interviews focusing on the positive versus the negative. Basically, they concluded that our lives are shaped by the interactions that we have with people, and that there's rarely a neutral interaction. They either have a positive or a negative interaction with us. The book is actually shaped around, when it says about how full is your bucket, the book is shaped around the metaphor that you have a dipper and a bucket. And if your bucket is full, you feel quite happy, fulfilled. The adage of "my cup runneth over" kind of probably ties back with this. And then you have a dipper. And with that dipper, you are free to take from your bucket and give to others, which is a positive feeling. However, when other people use their dipper and pull from your bucket, it can drain you, especially if you're not doing things to kind of top up your bucket. And so we're faced with the choice basically every day to fill one another's buckets, or else we drain our own or drain other people's. So the book there's 5 strategies in the book, and I'll just kind of read them here real quick. The strategy number 1 is prevent bucket dipping. Strategy 2 is shine a light on what is right. Strategy 3 is make best friends. And these are all things that make you feel good. Strategy 4 is give unexpectedly. And then the last one, which I actually found quite fascinating, was reverse the golden rule. So the golden rule, as I always understood it, was do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And his approach is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Just kind of an interesting way to reward it. But a Nebraska connection to this book. How full is your bucket? And Josh will put a link to this. This book was given to me, a long time ago. And this one is actually the Educator's Edition. And it's designed for teachers or coaches. And so there's a bunch of actual exercises in the back that you can copy and give out to athletes, students, stuff like that. But kind of a different take on psychology. I think I've certainly seen my role as a coach change over the years, and how I approach coaching with this generation is not the way I would have done it 15 years ago. I think, speaking of Nebraska, Dr. Tom Osborne has a famous quote that the days of helmet grabbing as a coach are over. That you can't just yell and scream and just berate an athlete or a student. They just don't respond to that, where maybe, us growing up, you felt like you disappointed your coach, or you disappointed your parents, or you disappointed, and that kind of feeling of shame or disappointment or regret, you just tried to do better typically. This generation do not seem to respond the same way. So this book was kind of a helpful way for me to kind of look at different ways for me personally, coaching. But I think it's got some great lessons just in the broader term of life too.
Do you know if the Don Clifton that wrote that book is the same Don Clifton that is or was the CEO of Gallup?
Yes, he actually was involved with Gallup.
Okay.
That's right.
I've met him. I actually, when I worked at Embassy Suites, they rented out our entire hotel, and I parked his car on multiple occasions and had a couple conversations. That guy, fun story about that guy. So he's the CEO of Gallup, and he walks in to check in, and there's a lady in front of him in line, and she's just giving the front desk girl hell, and so he sees this whole thing, and then she moves, and he comes up, and he's like, I'm gonna check and see if she's my employee. If she's my employee, she's done. because like he's like, my employees shouldn't teach anybody or talk to anybody that way.
Right.
And I don't think that ended up being, that was one of the times when it wasn't the entire hotel rented out to Gallup, but super cool guy. Drove a Dodge Durango. I remember that much.
When you brought him his car, did he tip you with water out of a dipper?
No, he did not. It was actual dollars.
Yeah. So he filled your bucket.
Yeah, filled my bucket with dollars. All right, for the workout of the week this week, we got a simple one for you. You don't need a gym or any equipment. What you're going to do is 100 lunges, 100 push-ups, and 100 sit-ups. So you can break those up any way that you'd like. You can go 10, 10, 10, 20, 20, 20, 25, 25, 25, whatever. But the goal is to finish everything in 10 minutes, which is entirely possible. I've been doing this workout about once a week for the last month or so. I'm sorry, once a day for the last month or so. And I've gotten my time down to about 6.5 to 7 minutes. So entirely feasible. Crank it out, get it done fast. And you can do this on the road. You can do this at the office. If you want to look weird, you can really do it anywhere. So 100 lunges, 100 push-ups, and 100 sit-ups in under 10 minutes. Well, this has been a really good episode. Thank you so much, Donnie, for coming on. Once again, thegentlemanbadass.com. Under the show notes, I'll have all of Donnie's information, so you can check him out. There's the bookshelf where this book will be, where you can buy that on Amazon. It'll be an affiliate link, so we'll get a little kickback for that. You can help support the podcast. Any of these books that we recommend, feel free to just go to the library. Honestly, most of the books I read are from the library. I just don't have enough money to buy all the books that may or may not be good. So check them out at the library. Patreon, we've got Patreon up and running, so swing by there. We're going to start filling that up with premium content. You can subscribe to that for as little as $1 a month, clear up into bigger dollar amounts, and there's more rewards, discounts on merch, free writing, free
Coaching
stuff,
sessions.
coaching sessions. So check that out. That would help us out quite a bit. And then also there's already merch for sale on the website. So thegentlemanbadass.com. Get on there, subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, like this and subscribe there. That helps us out quite a bit. And I think that's all we've got. Donnie, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are
awesome.
fantastic.
All right, until next time.